On the day I was meant to feel the most cherished, the most beautiful, and the most selected, I received a baby bottle wrapped in fragile white tissue paper and tied with a pink ribbon, handed to me by the woman who had always made me feel like an outsider, Judith Sterling, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. We stood behind the chapel just moments before the ceremony. My dress fit every curve perfectly, my hair was pinned flawlessly, and my heart raced so loudly I felt it in my ears. "Opened. It?" she said, smiling too sweetly. I should have known better. As I peeled back the tissue, I anticipated perhaps a handkerchief, jewelry, or something meaningful that acknowledged this occasion, this milestone. Instead, a baby bottle awaited me. A baby bottle with a note tucked inside. I looked up at her, puzzled. My fingers slowly pulled out the note, revealing just a few words in delicate cursive for when he finds a real wife. Then she laughed. Not a chuckle, not a snicker, but a soft, self-satisfied, condescending laugh, as if she had been waiting all year for this punchline. I froze. My throat constricted. My eyes watered. I glanced at Ethan, my fiancé, my partner of 3 years, who stood right beside her. He remained silent. No reaction, no objection. "No, Mom, that's not appropriate." Just a nervous smile and eyes that averted their gaze. He did nothing. In that moment, something shifted within me. Not because of the bottle or the note or even Judith's cruelty, which I had anticipated, but due to Ethan's silence, his acceptance of her humiliation of me on my wedding day. I felt as if the room around me had collapsed. All the white flowers, the soft violin music drifting in from the chapel, the laughter of guests settling into pews, all went silent in my ears. I longed to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to throw the bottle back at her. But I didn't, because I recalled what my mother always told me. Dignity doesn't shout. It stands tall and walks away. So instead, I carefully tucked the bottle back, in the tissue paper, placed it in the gift bag, and looked Judith straight in the eye. "Thank you," I said. What a thoughtful gesture. She tilted her head, confused, perhaps amused, unaware that I was already detaching. That's the amusing aspect of betrayal. It doesn't always cause an explosion. Sometimes it offers clarity. I walked into the chapel on shaky legs, clutching my bouquet like a shield. My sister Sierra caught my eye and instantly recognized that something was amiss. She reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly, but didn't question me. The music began. The crowd stood, and I took my first steps down the aisle toward the man I was supposed to spend eternity with. Ethan stood at the altar, still looking like the boy I fell in love with 3 years ago. But now, something felt different. Something I couldn't ignore. Behind him, Judith sat in the front row, already smug, already victorious. And me? I was heading toward a decision, a moment I couldn't reverse. The priest welcomed everyone, smiled warmly, and initiated the ceremony. The words blurred together: love, honor, commitment, forever. Then he turned to me. "Aveline Carter, do you take this man, Ethan Sterling, to be your lawful wedded husband?" The church fell silent. Every eye turned toward me. I looked at Ethan. I looked at Judith. And then I smiled. Not the smile of agreement, but one that signaled, "You have no idea what's coming next," because I was about to say something that would leave the entire church aghast. They say you'll always remember your wedding day. The dress, the flowers, the music, the nervous smiles, the way your heart races when you realize this is it. Your forever awaits at the end of that aisle. I remember mine too, but not for any of those reasons. I recall it because I realized in front of hundreds of people that the man I loved would never defend me. But let me rewind. Before the aisle, before the baby bottle, before the priest asked the question that shattered everything. My name is Aveline Carter. I was 28 when I thought I was stepping into my future, a future I had envisioned for years. White picket fences, cozy holidays, growing old with someone who made me feel seen. I'm the eldest of 2 girls. My younger sister Sierra is my firecracker. Blunt, protective, the kind of person who never lets anyone mess with those she loves. Growing up, it was just the 2 of us and our mom, Lena. No dad. He left when I was 6. One day he was there, The next, he was gone. We never really discussed it. We merely learned to build strong walls and stand independently. Lena worked 2 jobs, always smiling even when she was exhausted. She taught us to be kind but never weak, to extend grace but to protect our peace. Her favorite saying was, "You can bend without breaking, but remember when it's time to stand straight again." I carried that wisdom in my bones. Then came Ethan. Sterling, I met him at a nonprofit gala. He volunteered, assisting with logistics and planning. He was soft-spoken, kind, slightly awkward, but funny in a comforting way. He listened when I spoke, made me laugh when I needed it, and understood that I didn't require saving. I just needed someone to walk alongside me. Our love blossomed slowly like a cozy sweater. I introduced him to my mom and Sierra. Mom liked him. She recognized the good in people. Sierra was more cautious. She never uttered anything hurtful, but she observed him closely, as if she were waiting for something she couldn't articulate. I met his family a few months later, which is when I first sensed it. The weight. Judith Sterling, his mother, was everything I wasn't. Elegant in a stiff way, adorned in expensive perfume and flawless pearls, the kind of woman who turned her judgments into compliments. She regarded me like someone might notice a wrinkle in a silk dress. The first thing she ever said to me wasn't a greeting or a pleasant introduction. It was, "So, what does your father do?" I explained that he wasn't in the picture. She smiled knowingly. "Ah, I see." That was her modus operandi, always seeing things without voicing them. Little remarks, passive digs, insisting on assisting with our wedding planning while rewriting every detail behind my back to ensure Ethan understood her vision, speaking to me as if I were a mere placeholder. Ethan would brush it off. "She doesn't mean anything by it," he'd say. "She's just trying to help." But Judith didn't need to raise her voice. Her words cut like paper, thin, precise, easily overlooked unless you were the one bleeding. Still, I tried. I smiled. I compromised. I thought, once we're married, she'll back off. The morning of the wedding arrived, clear skies overhead. The chapel smelled of lilies and eucalyptus. Everything appeared like a fairy tale, and I kept repeating to myself, "This is it. Push through. This day is yours too." Sierra buzzed with Hampus Dappegat's energy, fixing my train, keeping the photographers at bay. Mom stood quietly in the corner of the bridal suite, observing me with those calm eyes that always seemed to know more than she said. She approached, brushed my hair back, and whispered, "You don't have to do anything today that doesn't feel like love." I smiled, even though my stomach was in knots, sensing that something already felt off. Judith had scarcely acknowledged me all morning. Ethan seemed distracted, and deep down, I sensed this wasn't my fairy tale. But I moved forward regardless because I believed in commitment, in choosing love, even when it was challenging. I just didn't realize I was the only one making that choice. The chapel was packed. Rows of friends and family, all dressed in soft pastels, turned their heads as the organ played. Light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful reflections across the pews. Everything appeared perfect, but I couldn't feel any of it. My hands were cold. My heart thudded against my ribcage. I struggled to breathe normally, to smile genuinely, but nothing felt normal anymore, not after what had just happened behind the chapel doors. I replayed the moment over and over in my mind. The baby bottle, Judith's smug smirk, her words echoing in my ears for when he finds a real wife, and Ethan standing right there, saying nothing. Not a single word, not even a look of concern. Just an awkward shuffling of his feet and a tight-lipped smile, as if he didn't want to create a scene. I wanted to scream. I wanted him to defend me just once, but he never had. And now, I was beginning to question whether he ever would. Sierra grasped my hand as we awaited our cue. She looked up at me. "You good?" Her voice was gentle yet probing, as if she were attempting to decipher the silence between us. I nodded too quickly. She leaned in. If something's wrong, we can stop this." I shook my head, not because I was certain I wanted to continue, but because I didn't want to cry. Not here, not yet. The doors opened, the music swelled, and I walked down the aisle like every woman who has ever reassured herself, "It'll be fine," even when everything within her screams that it's not. Ethan stood at the altar in a crisp navy suit, hands folded in front of him. He looked handsome and familiar, but suddenly, I didn't recognize him. I searched his eyes for something, regret, apology, affection, but found only emptiness, as if he were already halfway checked out. Behind him, Judith sat in the front row in a dove-gray suit and pearls, beaming as though she had just achieved something monumental, as if she were witnessing a performance she had orchestrated. As I walked past her, she tilted her head slightly and smiled, that same thin, superior smile I had come to know all too well. I turned my face forward. I would not cry. The ceremony commenced. The priest spoke of love, commitment, and growth together. His words blended together. I heard the guest softly laugh when he shared a light-hearted joke about married life. I smiled, but only with my mouth. Inside, I was spiraling. How did I end up here? When did I start ignoring the signs? There were countless moments over the past 3 years when Ethan allowed Judith to interrupt me, override me, even ridicule me in front of others. He always excused her behavior. She's just being dramatic. You're overthinking it. It's not worth a fight. But now I understood it wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about avoiding choosing me. And here I was, mere minutes away from promising him forever. My chest tightened. I glanced at my mom, seated at the edge of her seat, her eyes fixed on me. She appeared calm, but I could tell she knew I was unraveling. She gave me the smallest nod, the kind that conveys, "You know what's right. Act on it." I felt Sierra behind me, her steady presence a protective wall. The priest turned to Ethan, asking him the pivotal question, "Do you take Aveline Carter to be your lawful wedded wife?" Ethan smiled and replied, "I do." Naturally he would. Why wouldn't he? He wasn't the one who had been insulted. He wasn't the one who had been told she wasn't enough. He was still his mother's perfect son. Then the priest turned to me. "Aveline Carter, do you take Ethan Sterling to be your lawful wedded husband?" The room fell silent. Every heartbeat felt like an earthquake within my chest. I looked at Ethan, waiting. I looked at Judith, still smiling. I looked at Sierra, fierce and ready. I looked at my mother, calm, strong, trusting me. And for the first time in a very long time, I looked at myself and realized this moment wasn't solely about Ethan. It was about whether I would continue to betray myself to make others comfortable. I inhaled slowly, and I smiled. Not the smile of a bride in love, but the smile of a woman about to dismantle a lie and finally speak the truth. "Aveline Carter, do you take Ethan Sterling to be your lawful wedded husband?" Silence. That question, just 10 simple words, resonated through the chapel like a bell. Every eye turned towards me. The guests, the priest, Ethan, and even Judith leaned forward as if she were watching a slow-motion car crash she had orchestrated herself. I felt heat rising in my neck, my fingers twitching around the bouquet of white roses and baby's breath. My heart thudded so loudly in my ears that it drowned out everything else. I stood there in my satin gown, veil tucked back, surrounded by candlelight and perfection, and I was drowning. But here's the thing. No one warns you about drowning. It's not always violent. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes you smile while it happens. I looked at Ethan, the man I had laughed with, dreamed with, kissed under Christmas lights, the man I had once envisioned growing old beside. He looked back at me with that same expectant expression he had worn for years, soft, blank, silent, the kind of face that asks for nothing and promises nothing. He didn't even appear nervous. He looked resigned, as if he assumed I would just comply because I always had. Then slowly, something shifted. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was grief. Grief for the girl I used to be. The girl who made excuses. For others, who convinced herself love meant patience, even when it meant pain. Who shrank a little more each time she swallowed her truth to keep someone else comfortable. My grip loosened on the bouquet. I scanned the guests. Friends, co-workers, distant relatives, people I barely knew, people I loved, people unaware of what I had just endured behind those chapel doors. And then, my eyes found my mom. She sat tall, lips pressed tightly together, but her eyes remained soft and steady. They weren't pleading, they weren't fearful, they were waiting. Not for me to say yes, not for me to go through the motions, but for me to choose myself. Next to her sat Sierra, jaw clenched, gripping the edge of the pew as if ready to run up and drag me out herself if needed. I felt both of them holding space for me, granting me permission to walk away, even if it meant walking alone. That's when I recalled something Mom used to tell us growing up. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining and simply act. So, I did. I let the silence linger for 1 second longer. Then I turned slowly to the priest. My voice emerged calm, clear, stronger than I had anticipated. No. The words sliced through the air like a blade. Gasps erupted, not from one person, but from the entire congregation, a ripple of stunned breaths and hushed whispers. I didn't flinch. I turned to Ethan. I don't take you, Ethan, because you haven't truly been mine for a long time. You've always belonged to her. I nodded towards Judith. A few guests turned in their seats to look at her. Judith's expression remained unchanged, but I could see the color drain from her cheeks. You stood there and allowed your mother to humiliate me. You said nothing. You let it happen. I stepped forward, holding out the small white gift bag I had brought up the aisle with me. The same one she had given me just minutes before the ceremony. This, I said, slowly pulling out the baby bottle, was your mother's wedding gift. To me, along with a note that said, "For when he finds a real wife." Gasps again. Murmurs. I raised it high for everyone to see, and he stood there saying nothing, just smiling. I walked to the front row and gently placed the bottle at Judith's feet. You can keep it. I don't need it. I turned back to Ethan. He opened his mouth, but no words emerged. I wanted a partner, not someone who watches me drown and calls it calm. Then I turned to the priest and quietly said, I think this ceremony is over. I took a deep breath, turned away from the altar, and walked down the aisle alone. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor like a drumbeat. Click, click, freedom. As I reached the midway point, I heard something behind me. Applause. It started. Small, just 1 or 2 people, then grew. My mom was on her feet. So was Sierra, and then a few more guests. And more. People were crying, nodding, smiling, some in shock, but none of it mattered because I had just accomplished the hardest thing I had ever done. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt light. My heels echoed through the chapel as I walked away from the altar, bouquet forgotten, veil trailing behind me like a ghost. I didn't look back. Not at Ethan, not at Judith, not at... The faces frozen in shock. But I heard them. Gasps, whispers, some laughter, nervous, uncertain, and then applause. It started with my sister. Sierra stood up so quickly that her chair screeched backward. She clapped loudly and proudly, her face glowing as if she had been waiting years to see the truth land right where it belonged. My mom followed suit, elegant and strong, tears glistening in her eyes, but a smile blooming across her face like spring after a long winter. One by one, others joined in. Not everyone, of course. Some remained stiff, horrified, scandalized. Likely, the same individuals who gossiped behind closed doors and advised their daughters to stay quiet to keep the peace. But enough people stood. Enough clapped. Enough believed what I had done wasn't madness. It was bravery. I hadn't anticipated it. But the sound lifted me. It enveloped me like a warm blanket. Not applause for a performance, but acknowledgement. A silent agreement. We see you, we understand. But not everyone applauded. I passed Ethan's best man, his college roommate Jared, who appeared pale and uncertain. His girlfriend nudged him, whispering something I couldn't hear. I passed Ethan's aunt, who averted her gaze as if ashamed, not of me, but of what she now saw in her nephew. And I passed Judith, still seated, still frozen, her mouth slightly agape, her fingers gripping her clutch so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The baby bottle lay at her feet like an unexpected grenade. She didn't clap, of course. I paused beside her row for just a moment, enough for her to understand that I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I looked her in the eye, and for once, she didn't return my gaze with that smug superiority. There was no smirk, no clipped laugh, only fear. For women like Judith, power doesn't stem from love, joy, or grace. It derives from control, and I had just taken that away in front of everyone. I didn't need to utter a word. My silence spoke louder than anything I could have shouted. I kept walking. By the time I reached the chapel doors, Sierra had caught up to me. She grabbed my hand, breathless and tearful. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen," she said, a shaky laugh escaping me. "I think I'm going to throw up," she added, grinning. "Totally fair. Want me to hold your hair back?" We both laughed, and in that moment, like magic, the tension fell away from me like old armor. My shoulders relaxed, my chest opened. I hadn't realized how long I had been bracing myself for impact, for judgment, for backlash. But now that I had faced it, I was still standing. We stepped outside into the sun, and it felt as if the world had transformed. Behind us, the chapel. Doors remained open, voices echoing from within. People murmured, debated, tried to process what had just happened, but none of it affected me anymore. Ethan never followed me out. Not that day, not the next, not ever. No texts, no calls, not even a message through a mutual friend. I later learned that he left the reception early with his mother, and he didn't say much on the way out. Apparently, Judith was deeply embarrassed. I was sure she was more concerned for herself than anything else. As for Ethan, I realized he hadn't just failed me once. He had been failing me consistently and quietly for years. I had mistaken his silence for kindness, for gentleness, but it was just passivity disguised as peace. And peace that requires you to shrink yourself is not peace. It's a cage. In the weeks that followed, I received messages from guests. Some apologized, some thanked me, and a few women expressed that they wished they had the courage to do what I had done years earlier. One woman even wrote, "You reminded me I still have a voice. I forgot. Thank you for waking it up." I read that message and cried, not from sadness, but from release. Because in that moment, I understood that this story wasn't solely about Ethan or Judith or that baby bottle. It was about me choosing truth over image, power over silence, and freedom over fear. That day, I didn't just walk out of a wedding. I walked back to myself. 3 days after I left my own wedding, I found myself in my childhood bedroom. The same creaky floorboards, the same ceiling fan that hummed too loudly, and the same scent of lavender and old books from the shelf that Mom never allowed anyone to dust because, as she said, memories reside in settled places. I lay there for a while, not moving, not thinking, just breathing. For the first time in weeks, my body didn't feel like it was on high alert. My jaw was relaxed, my stomach wasn't tied in knots, and the pressure in my chest had lifted. I didn't regret leaving, not even for a second. What I did feel was grief. Not because I missed Ethan. I didn't. I mourned the version of him I had imagined, the man I believed he could be. I grieved the future I had constructed in my mind, clinging to hope like a lifeline. I had invested so much in that dream, but I forgot to ask if it was ever truly mine. I was angry with myself for ignoring the signs, for accepting his silence, for laughing off Judith's cruelty to maintain the peace. But most importantly, I felt free. Later that afternoon, I sat on the back porch with my mom, sipping coffee from the mug I had used since college, chipped at the rim but still standing strong. She didn't say anything for a while. She just sat, with me the way only mothers can. Her presence was steady and grounding. Then she spoke. "You could have gone through with it, you know. No one would have blamed you." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I would have blamed myself." She smiled with pride. "Good. That means you've grown." I looked at her, tears welling in my eyes. "I feel like I let people down." "You didn't let anyone down, Aveline. You told the truth, and you did it with grace. There's not a woman alive who doesn't wish she'd done that at least once in her lifetime." Those words stuck with me. A few days later, I finally opened my phone. Dozens of texts awaited. Some kind, some confused, some just nosy. I ignored most of them. But one message stopped me cold. It was from Ethan's cousin, a quiet girl named Lily whom I barely knew. She wrote, "What you did at the wedding was brave. I've been engaged twice. I walked down the aisle both times and didn't say a word. I still think about it. I wish I'd done what you did." In that moment, it hit me. This wasn't just my story, it was ours. Every woman who had stayed silent, played small, or accepted less than she deserved because someone convinced her it was polite. I wasn't broken, I wasn't dramatic. I was done shrinking, and once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I didn't spiral, I didn't fall apart. Instead, I began anew, piece by piece. I returned to work, repainted my apartment, took a solo weekend trip to Maine, and walked barefoot on the beach just because I could. Sierra and I grew closer than ever. She showed up every weekend with wine and too much takeout. "I'm not going to say I told you so," she declared, "but I am going to say I've got your back." And she did. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. I poured out every thought, every memory, every moment from that day. It became therapy, clarity, and a reflection of me in unfiltered words. Judith tried to reach out once through a mutual friend, wanting to talk and clear the air. I declined. Some people don't deserve a second conversation, and closure isn't something they get to request when they've never once offered you dignity. As for Ethan, I never heard from him again. And that silence made sense. It wasn't just who he was. It was who he chose to be. I choose differently now. I choose people who speak up, who stand by me when I'm pushed down, who clap for me when I rise, and who love me out loud, not just when it's easy. So, no, I didn't marry Ethan Sterling. I didn't walk out of that chapel with a husband. Instead, I left with something far more powerful, myself. And that, I've learned, is a kind of love you never have to question. If you've ever felt pressured to stay quiet, to smile through the hurt, or to play small for others' comfort, just know you're not alone. You never have to apologize for choosing yourself. If this story resonated with you, helped you feel seen, or offered something to ponder, please like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and drop a comment below. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your thoughts or your own story. If you want more real stories like this, raw, honest, unfiltered, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment. Thanks for being here. And remember, you don't have to say, "I do," to prove your worth. You just have to say, "I'm enough." And that's my story. I didn't leave the chapel with a husband. I walked away with my voice. And honestly, that was the real gift. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your worth, or even just made you think, please take a moment to like the video. It helps more than you know. Share it with someone who might need a little strength today. Comment below, sharing your thoughts or your own moment of choosing yourself. I read every single one. And if you want more true stories that are real, raw, and unapologetically honest, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Thanks for being here. You are enough.